church has organized this, and I wanted to begin by saying how pleased we are that you could come here to this first conversation circle here in the Walls of Walk. So this is where sacred Anishinaabe creation stories and teachings have been painted by Philip Cote amidst stained glass windows, where the stories of the Beatitudes are told. And there are stories and prophecies about the eighth fire and what it means for our times have been shared in this sacred space. We've talked in this space about what it means to become kin. So we're kind of on a journey together to understand and listen to each other about what becoming kin means. We are in a time where the world is experiencing a lot of war, a lot of conflict, where Indigenous peoples in Canada are still dealing with colonialism and racism. I deal with that a lot in my work. And we also know that the lands and the air and the waters, including where we live here in Toronto, are the treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit. That those lands require our care and attention, and the air and the waters do, and we all have responsibility to be caretakers. So Mary, as some of you know, is a member of Curve Lake First Nation. She's of the Eagle Clan, and she lives here in Toronto. She has 8 kids. She has a lot of experience dealing with the child welfare system. She has worked as an entrepreneur since 2021, right? And as a public speaker and activist, and she has spoken with others and advocated about the effects of the child welfare system and what has happened for a lot of Indigenous families. So she's here today to share her stories from her own life as an Indigenous person and to share her dreams and hopes for the future. And then talking together about how we as a community can move forward together to find better ways to live respectfully with each other as treaty people and to respect the lands and waters in this treaty territory. With that, welcome Mary Wildman.
Thank you, Nancy. I'm so glad to be here with all of you today. When I first had the thought of being the first speaker for this series, it was really, I thought it was a bit like, I was nervous at the idea, but then I was really excited to, just because I see myself as a leader, so to be able to start off this series in a good way and share a bit of my personal story with the child welfare system with my family. So my story began on September 4th, 2015. I had 7 children at the time. At the time, 5 boys, 2 girls at the time, and that day changed my life forever. That day, my children were taken away by CAS. The cops had showed up at our house unexpectedly. This was not something that I had known ahead of time. They came with a bunch of workers, bunch of strangers that the children didn't know. They came, they took them. It was literally like earth-shattering. You don't know, that you can think that your life can change in such an instance like that. And for me, it did. It really shook me to my core. And I truly didn't know how I was going to be able to navigate going forward. I knew that I loved my kids dearly and I was going to fight for them the best that I could. But as we all know, the system has not and is not built for a lot of Indigenous families to stay together. It's more or less separating us, and which, allows for a lot of other troubles to happen for people. So when that happened on that day, going forward, I ended up having access visits with my children at the CAS in Peterborough, because I'm born and raised in Peterborough. So this happened in Peterborough. And I spent months visiting my children at the CAS office. I can't tell you what kind of experience that is like. It's like visiting your children in jail. When you go there, it is video recorded. Your visits are video recorded there. They pay attention to what food you bring them. Everything. You're under scrutiny for everything that you do. And so it's really like almost a losing battle when you feel like you don't have enough support. I didn't have any support. My mom passed away when I was 10, and my father has not really been present in my life, so I didn't have any support. And I didn't even have support of like my home community of Curve Lake First Nations at the time. They did not support me in this situation. So that was really heart-wrenching that I didn't have anyone on my side to help assist me through this situation. So I felt very lost. And honestly, looking back on it, I don't even know how I survived, really. I went into a very lonely, numb place, because when this kind of thing happens to you, for your own like sanity, you have to, just do what you can to survive, because you don't know what is going to happen in those instances. So for me, I spent months, and I think it was like a year and a half, doing these visits. I wasn't successful in any of the stages of court at all in Peterborough, which was very challenging for me because I wanted to be with my kids, but the system was not helping me. They were not looking at me like I was fit to parent my children. So it was very stressful. And I remember, I can't remember the exact date, but I remember the court had decided that I was no longer, the specific words were, my relationship with my children was no longer meaningful or beneficial. And they wanted to stop visits with me and my kids. So what actually ended up happening was they have what is called a goodbye visit. They probably still exist now in the Western CIS, where they have a visit. You have a visit with your kids, the last visit, which is your last visit that you won't see them again until they're 18. So I wrote them each a letter, each of them a letter, knowing them and their personalities at the time of that age. And I had said in the letter that I wished nothing but the best for them, and that I was going to see them again when they're 18. That's all that I hoped for. Of course, that day was so hard for the kids, and not like me, because they're with these families that, they were placed with. So it was very hard to go through all of this and the emotions. So for me, I don't know, like I was a mess, and I had just looked at the person who did not want me to have my kids. And I literally said to her, "Are you happy? Like, are you happy now? Because like you took everything away from me. Honestly, are you happy? Don't stand there now and ask me if I have support, because you knew I didn't have support. So don't do that to me." So then going forward, what happened was something said to me, because if you know me, I have a fiery personality and I never give up on anything. So for me, a light bulb just went off in my head, and I said, you know what? These people are not going to get the best of me. This is not going to be the end of my story. It can't be. This just cannot be the end of my story. So I went and I took some courses, fixed up my resume, just tried to make myself look like a good, functional human being to the best of my ability to prove to the world, because I felt like I had to prove to the world that I'm worthy of having my kids. So it was a really tough place to be. So in that whole situation, what ended up happening was I started applying for jobs, and then I ended up getting this job actually here in Toronto with one of the major banks here in Toronto. So when that happened for me in the summer of 2018, when that happened for me, I was just so elated. I was excited because I was like, this is my chance to prove everybody wrong, still stay on the path going forward. Still didn't know when I was going to see my kids again, but I just knew if I could build up my life, that it looked so good to people that, you know what, they'll come back. They will come back. So I was in Toronto maybe about 2 months, and then Aboriginal Legal Services here in Toronto had reached out to me. They heard about my case, actually, And they reached out to me and they said, hey, Mary, I'm so-and-so from Aboriginal Legal. Do you want to come and meet with us? I was hesitant to go meet with them because you can't trust anybody. Not when you go through what I went through, you can't trust anybody. Like, there's so many, but I did anyways. I said, you know what, it's an Indigenous agency. Let's see what can happen. I went, they were so welcoming. They took me under their wing, like the elder there. It was just so like life-changing. It was really good for me that because they knew about my case and they did research on my case, and then they saw so many injustices that were done. And they're like, no, we're gonna do our best, Mary, to see what we can do here. So the next step for me was to apply for our situation to get heard in the Court of Appeal. Child welfare cases rarely get heard in the Court of Appeal, but mine was pressed so far by a lot of supporters that it was. So my situation got heard in the Court of Appeal here in Toronto in the spring of 2019. It got heard. And I went there thinking, you got nothing to lose, Mary. You've already lost enough. You don't have anything to lose. Just give it your all. You got this. So I was like, okay. And the room, it was so wonderful. The room was filled with Indigenous lawyers, Indigenous like people that advocate for like Indigenous people. It was just so moving to like see that, like finally, like it took me to be in Toronto to literally have that like support, which was so crazy. And yeah, so it took them about, I think 2 weeks it took them. And I was on the TTC and I got a call from one of the lawyers and they said, Mary, they're like, you won. And I think I said, what the? I was like, what? I was like, what are you talking about? How can I win after having like no success all these years? How can I, it was crazy. So this meant that I was going to get to see my kids again. Like after them not seeing me for a few years, like they were going to get to see me again. So I was going to be able to get that relationship going and see where, my kids are at, how they're doing. So that was a real like turning point. So what ended up happening actually, so the Court of Appeal was in April of 2019 and I was reunited with all of the children at Curve Lake powwow in September of 2019. So we were actually, first time that we were all together again with like all of the supporters, all of the parents that had raised the children while not being in my life. So it was really like, it was so emotional. Like it was just, and then to be welcomed back into your community that you weren't really a part of to begin with. It was really transformational, really, is what happened. So that was the start of me, basically, my story of my kids coming back into my life. So since 2019, I've honestly come like full circle. I've brought in my children, welcomed them with open arms. As you all know, Xavier has lived with me now for a year and a half. Xavier came back to live with me when he turned 18. So I'm really just so happy that we've been able to be on this journey together, because it's like a healing journey. We're never going to be healed from what happened to us. We're not. Like they took so much away from us, not just me, like the kids. And the kids have this to like live with forever, that this is their reality. And the fact is, my children now, they don't just have one mom. Like they have two other sets of parents that I have to share this role with. As a mom and as their birth mom, that took me a very long time to come to the realization that I had to share this role with, these new parents, because that's not normal, right? As we know, like you don't share that role, but I can honestly say that I have a great relationship with both of the families, and it's been like really just amazing that I was able to do that. And I think that why I share my story so broadly and so like boldly is because this still happens to like families. You know, families need to hear like, and other people need to hear what actually happens to Indigenous families. And, you know, you need to be able to learn, listen, be there, and try and change the system to the best of our abilities. So there's a lot that we can do in terms of thinking about that. But I really just think that it's really, yeah, I'm like I said, since I started my job at TD, I've had several jobs. I've been an entrepreneur since 2021. So I've really honestly turned my life around. So I'm really happy, and I've come so far, and I'm just in a really good place right now, and I love all of my children immensely. And I even had another child after the fact. So my little one, who's going to be 5 in July, I had him after the fact. So I literally got a chance to parent again after that was like taken away from me. So I've gotten to be able to parent a child for like 5 straight years without anything going wrong. So I really think that it's just really important for us to just have this, you know, this conversation and be able to be vulnerable. And, you know, like when people talk about like truth and reconciliation, right? Reconciliation is the uncomfortable part, because that's where like the work needs to be done, you know? So it's kind of making people think like, how do we do this? You know, because honestly, the last time I checked, the highest percentage of kids in care is over 50% are Indigenous and Black that are in the child welfare system. So that is like really like staggering numbers that like, you know, so there's something wrong that needs to, you know, be looked at and see how we go forward with this. But I've made it my mission to use my voice and advocate for the families that have been affected by the child welfare system, and also just, you know, being that person, that shining light for people when they think maybe they can't get through something. Well, they definitely can, after, you know, hearing what I've gone through. So I'm really glad to be able to be here and just share a bit of this story with you. And then maybe for some of you that know Xavier, you'll be able to get more of a, you know, a better idea of what Xavier has gone through. So it's with him being my oldest. So but I really am just so glad that I've been able to share my story here with you today. And I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation today, and, you know, just hearing what everyone has to say, and like to think about things that we need to think about are what do we want to see in the world? And I think, and what changes are we wanting to make? And also, what are even like some of our dreams? What are we striving for? Like, what does that kind of look like? I think is kind of a question to leave you with, I think.